Daciana moved like a woman with nothing left but instinct. One moment she stood in the center of the hall, breath trembling in her chest, and the next she was walking toward the throne as if something unseen was pulling her. Eyes followed her. Whispers chased her. No one understood why she kept going, not even her. The air thickened around her, charged and watching, as though the walls themselves knew she was crossing a line she could never return from. She reached the final step. She didn't pause. She sat on his lap. Him. The feared Alpha King everyone knew not to cross. Silence crushed the room. His hands settled on her waist, slow, deliberate, claiming, and the look in his eyes told her she hadn't escaped anything. "You're mine now," he said, and she knew she'd stepped straight into a fate no one in that room could name, except him. "Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming." The weight of his hand was the only thing keeping her from shattering. Daciana felt the heat of it through the thin fabric of her ceremony dress, felt the press of his fingers against her ribs like he was counting each breath she took. Her lungs burned. She couldn't tell if it was from the run across the hall or from the way every wolf in the room was now staring at her like she'd just signed her own death warrant. Maybe she had. The Alpha King, Canagan Ardolf, hadn't moved except to catch her. His body was solid beneath hers, all muscle and controlled power, and when she finally dared to glance up at his face, she found him looking not at her but at the crowd. At them. His expression was unreadable, carved from stone and winter shadows, but there was something in his eyes that made her skin prickle. Amusement. He was amused. Canagan. The voice that cut through the silence was sharp, brittle with authority. Elder Veronica stood at the head of the high court table, her silver hair gleaming under the ceremonial torches. "This is unprecedented. The binding ceremony cannot be." "Cannot be what?" Canagan's voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder. "He didn't raise it. He didn't need to." Interrupted. "It seems it already has been." Daciana's heart slammed against her ribs. She should move. Should stand. Should say something. But her body had locked up the moment she'd made contact with him, and now she couldn't remember how to make her limbs obey her. All she could do was sit there on the lap of the most dangerous wolf in the Northern Territories while the entire High Court watched. While he watched, Theron Grave stood where she'd left him, in the center of the ceremonial circle, his face twisted with something between rage and disbelief. The gold binding cord still hung from his hand, the one he was supposed to tie around her wrist to complete their mate bond. His lips pulled back from his teeth. "She's mine," he snarled. "The Oracle chose us. You can't." "Can't?" Canagan's fingers flexed against Daciana's waist, and she felt the rumble of his voice through her whole body. "Are you telling your king what he can and cannot do, Grave?" The temperature in the room dropped. Theron's jaw worked, his hands curling into fists at his sides. Daciana knew that look. She'd seen it 100 times growing up in the Riverside Pack, right before he'd shoved her into the mud, or hidden her clothes during training, or whispered vicious things in her ear when no one else could hear. He'd made her childhood a nightmare. And now the Oracle had bound them together. Or tried to. "My king." Theron's voice came out strained, forced through clenched teeth. "With respect, the Omega is confused. Overwhelmed. The ceremony is sacred, and she's clearly not in her right mind. If you would just..." "I'm not confused," Daciana heard herself say. The words came out stronger than she felt. Every eye in the hall swung to her, and the urge to curl into herself, to disappear, crashed over her like a wave. But Canagan's hand was still on her waist, steady and warm, and somehow that made it easier to keep talking. "I know exactly what I'm doing," she continued, even though that was a lie. She had no idea what she was doing. "I refuse the bond." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped something that clattered against stone. Elder Veronica's face went pale. "You cannot refuse an oracle bond," the elder said, her voice shaking. "It is written in the old laws. Once the match is revealed, both parties are bound by old laws that were written by wolves who never had to live with their mistakes." Daciana's hands trembled in her lap, but she fisted them in the fabric of her dress to hide it. "I won't do it. I won't bind myself to him." "You don't have a choice," Theron spat. He took a step forward, and immediately two of Canagan's royal guards moved to intercept him. He froze, his eyes wild. "The oracle saw our bond. Our future. You think you can just walk away from fate because you're too weak to?" "Enough." Canagan's voice wasn't loud, but it silenced Theron like a hand over his mouth. The Alpha King leaned back in his throne, and Daciana felt the shift in his posture, the way his body relaxed even as the air around him seemed to sharpen. His hand never left her waist. "The Omega has invoked sanctuary," Canagan said, his tone almost conversational. "She came to my throne of her own will and placed herself under my protection. Or is the High Court suggesting that the ancient right of sanctuary no longer applies in these halls?" Elder Veronica's mouth opened. Closed. Her gaze darted to the other elders seated at the long table, but none of them would meet her eyes. "The right of sanctuary," she said slowly, "was created for wolves fleeing persecution or unjust sentencing. Not for avoiding a sacred bond. And yet the law makes no distinction about why sanctuary is sought. Only that it must be granted." Canagan tilted his head, studying the elder with the kind of casual interest a wolf might give a rabbit. "Unless you'd like to challenge that interpretation. We can convene a formal council if you'd prefer." The threat hung in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. A formal council would take weeks, maybe months. And during that time, Daciana would remain under the king's protection, untouchable. Elder Veronica's lips pressed into a thin line. "No challenge, my king." "Good." Canagan's thumb traced a small circle against Daciana's hip, and she barely suppressed a shiver. "Then it's settled. The Omega will remain in the royal house until this matter is resolved." "And the bond?" Theron's voice cracked on the word. He looked like he wanted to tear something apart with his bare hands. "What happens to the oracle's vision?" "I suppose that depends." Canagan's gaze finally slid to Daciana, and the weight of it stole the air from her lungs. His eyes were darker than she'd expected, not the gold or amber most alphas carried but something deeper. Almost black. "On what the Omega chooses to do with her freedom." Freedom. The word tasted strange in her mouth, unfamiliar. Daciana had never been free, not really. Born an Omega in a world that measured worth by rank, she'd spent her whole life being pushed aside, overlooked, dismissed. And Theron had been the worst of them all. She'd spent years trying to be invisible around him. Years ducking her head and taking his cruelty because fighting back only made it worse. And then the Oracle had called their names together during the ceremony, had announced them as mates in front of every pack in the Northern Territories, and something inside her had just snapped. She'd looked at Theron standing there with that triumphant sneer on his face, and she'd known she couldn't do it. Couldn't spend the rest of her life bound to someone who'd made her feel small and worthless and broken. So she'd run. Straight to the one wolf in the room even Theron couldn't touch. "I need time," Daciana said quietly, her eyes still locked with Canagan's. "To think. To figure out what comes next." Time. Something flickered across Canagan's face, too quick to name. "Very well. You'll have it." He stood then, and Daciana suddenly found herself cradled against his chest as he rose. She made a small sound of surprise, her hands instinctively grabbing his shoulders for balance, and he glanced down at her with that same unreadable expression. "Try to keep up," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. Then, louder, to the room, "This ceremony is concluded. Everyone out." The hall erupted into chaos. Wolves talking over each other, arguing, questioning. Elder Veronica's voice rose above the din, trying to restore order, but Canagan was already moving. He carried Daciana toward the side entrance like she weighed nothing, his guards falling into formation around them, and she caught one last glimpse of Theron's face before they passed through the doorway. He looked murderous. Good, some vicious part of her thought. Let him hurt the way he made me hurt. But that satisfaction lasted only until they were alone in the corridor beyond, the heavy doors swinging shut behind them. Then reality crashed down on her like a collapsing ceiling, and she realized what she'd just done. Where she was. Who was holding her? "You can put me down," she said, her voice small. Canagan didn't put her down. He kept walking, his strides long and unhurried, and Daciana became acutely aware of how his arms felt around her. Solid. Secure. Nothing like the rough, careless way Theron had grabbed her during training sessions. "Where are we going?" she tried instead. "My wing." Her heart stuttered. Why? "Because if I leave you anywhere else in this castle, half the wolves in that room will spend the night trying to get to you." Canagan's eyes didn't leave the corridor ahead. "And I don't feel like executing anyone tonight." "Executing?" Daciana's mouth went dry. "You wouldn't actually." "I would." He said it so simply, so matter-of-fact, that she believed him. "You invoked sanctuary, little Omega. That means your safety is now my responsibility. And I take my responsibilities very seriously. Little Omega." The words should have stung, they were meant as a slight in most packs, a reminder of weakness, but the way Canagan said them didn't sound mocking. Just, observant. Like he was stating a fact. They turned a corner, then another. The castle was enormous, a sprawling fortress of dark stone and ancient wood, and Daciana had no idea how to find her way back even if she wanted to. Which she didn't. She thought. "Maybe. I didn't plan this," she blurted out. "What I did back there. I didn't, I wasn't trying to cause trouble or challenge the elders or." "I know. You know. I was watching you during the ceremony." Canagan's grip shifted slightly, adjusting her weight. "You looked like you were going to be sick. And when Graves' name was called with yours, you looked like you were going to bolt. I was curious to see what you'd do." Daciana stared at him. "You were watching me." "Why?" "Because you were the only one in that room who didn't look like they wanted to be there." A faint smile ghosted across his mouth, there and gone so fast she almost missed it. Everyone else was performing. Playing their parts. But you looked terrified. She had been terrified. She still was. Her hands were shaking against his shoulders, and she couldn't seem to make them stop. They reached another set of doors, these ones carved with intricate wolf designs. Canagan shouldered through them without breaking stride, and suddenly they were in a private chamber unlike anything Daciana had ever seen. Warm firelight, rich fabrics, furniture that looked old and comfortable rather than just expensive. It smelled like cedar and something else, something sharp and clean that made her think of winter mountains. It smelled like him. Canagan finally set her down, steadying her with a hand on her elbow until she found her balance. Daciana immediately took a step back, putting space between them, and tried not to notice the way his mouth tightened at the movement. "You're safe here," he said. "No one comes into this wing without my permission. Not even the elders." "And you?" The question came out before she could stop it. "Am I safe from you?" Canagan went very still. For a long moment he just looked at her, his dark eyes searching her face for something she couldn't name. Then he moved past her toward a side table where a crystal decanter sat waiting. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, his movements precise and controlled. "That," he said quietly, "depends on what you think you need protection from." He held out one of the glasses. Daciana stared at it, then at him, her mind racing. She should probably refuse. Should keep a clear head. But her hands were still shaking and her chest felt too tight and she desperately needed something to take the edge off the panic clawing at her throat. She took the glass. Drank. The liquid burned going down, harsh and warming, and she coughed once before catching her breath. When she looked up, Canagan was watching her with that same intense focus he'd had in the throne room. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. So why claim sanctuary for an Omega who just disrupted a sacred ceremony?" Canagan took a slow sip from his own glass. "You want the truth?" "Yes. Because I wanted to see what would happen." He set his glass down, and the sound of crystal on wood seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "And because Theron Grave is a cruel, vicious wolf who enjoys making others suffer. I've had my eye on him for a while now. If the Oracle truly saw you bound to him, then fate has a twisted sense of humor." Daciana's throat tightened. "You know him. Everyone knows him. His reputation precedes him." Canagan's expression darkened. "What I want to know is why the Oracle would pair someone like you with someone like him. Someone like me." Daciana's fingers tightened on her glass. "You mean weak? Powerless? An Omega?" "No." Canagan moved closer, and Daciana's breath caught as he stopped just in front of her. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his skin. "I mean someone brave enough to walk across a room full of hostile wolves and sit on a king's throne to save herself. That takes a kind of strength most alphas don't have." She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. He was too close, his presence too overwhelming, and something about the way he was looking at her made her feel stripped bare and exposed and terrifyingly seen. "I'm not brave," she whispered. "I'm just desperate." "Sometimes," Canagan said softly, "they're the same thing." His hand came up, and Daciana froze as his fingers brushed along her jawline. Gentle. Careful. Nothing like the rough, possessive touches she'd endured from other wolves. This felt different. Like he was asking permission with every movement. "You're shaking," he observed. "I know. Are you afraid of me?" The honest answer was yes. Of course she was afraid. He was the Alpha King. The most powerful wolf in the north. One word from him could end her life, could destroy everything she'd ever known. But that wasn't the whole truth. "I'm afraid of what happens next," she said instead. "I refused a sacred bond. Challenged the Oracle's vision. There's going to be consequences." "Yes," Canagan agreed. "There will be. And you can't protect me forever." "No." His thumb traced the line of her jaw, and Daciana's eyes fluttered closed despite herself. "I can't. But I can protect you long enough for you to figure out your next move. Unless." His voice trailed off. Daciana's eyes snapped open. "Unless what?" Canagan's hand dropped away from her face, but he didn't step back. If anything, he leaned closer, until his mouth was right next to her ear and she could feel the words against her skin. "Unless you decide you don't want protection," he murmured. "Unless you decide you want something else entirely." Heat flooded through her, sharp and sudden and completely unexpected. Daciana's heart hammered against her ribs, and she realized with a jolt of shock that this feeling, wasn't fear at all. It was want. She wanted him to keep touching her. Wanted him to keep looking at her like she was something precious and rare. Wanted him to. No. No, she couldn't think like that. She'd just escaped one bond, she couldn't immediately throw herself into another. Especially not with him. Especially not with the Alpha King who'd just claimed ownership of her in front of the entire High Court. "You're mine now." The words echoed in her head, and she shivered. Canagan pulled back, his expression once again unreadable. You're exhausted. There's a room through that door, it's yours for as long as you need it. Sleep. We'll talk more in the morning. Daciana nodded, not trusting her voice. She started toward the door he'd indicated, then paused and looked back. Canagan had already turned away, was pouring himself another drink, and the firelight cast his profile in sharp relief. Thank you, she said quietly. For what you did today. Even if I don't understand why you did it. He didn't turn around. You will. Will what? Understand why. He lifted his glass in a small salute. Eventually. Now go rest, little Omega. Tomorrow is going to be complicated. That was probably the understatement of the century. But Daciana was too tired, too overwhelmed to argue. She slipped through the door into the bedroom beyond and found herself in a space that was somehow both luxurious and comfortable. A massive bed dominated one wall, covered in soft furs and thick blankets. Windows looked out over the castle grounds, though it was full dark now and she could see nothing but her own reflection. She looked like a ghost. Pale and wide-eyed and completely out of place in this expensive room with her rumpled ceremony dress and tangled hair. She looked like someone who'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Or maybe the smartest decision. Daciana pressed her hands against the cool window glass and tried to calm her racing thoughts. Outside, somewhere in the castle, Theron was probably raging. Plotting. Planning how to get her back under his control. And the elders were probably arguing about precedent and ancient laws and how to salvage the disaster she'd created. But in here, in this room, she was safe. She was protected. She was hers. For the first time in her life, Daciana didn't belong to anyone. Not her pack, not her family, not the Omega hierarchy that had defined her existence. Canagan had claimed her, yes, but in a way that gave her shelter rather than chains. At least, she hoped that's what it was. A soft knock made her jump. She turned to find Canagan standing in the doorway, and her breath caught at the sight of him backlit by firelight. I forgot to mention, he said, his voice pitched low and careful. There are clothes in the wardrobe. Help yourself to anything you need. And if you get hungry, there's a bell by the bed. Pull it and someone will bring you food. Thank you, Daciana said again, because what else could she say? Canagan nodded once, then hesitated. One more thing. Yes. His eyes locked with hers, and the intensity in them made her knees weak. I meant what I said in the throne room, he told her. You're mine now. Under my protection, my authority, my care. That means no one, not Theron, not the elders, not anyone, can touch you without going through me first. Do you understand? Daciana swallowed hard. I understand. Good. But he still didn't move, still didn't leave. And Daciana. It was the first time he'd used her name. The sound of it in his deep voice sent electricity down her spine. Yes. You made the right choice tonight. Whatever happens next, whatever consequences come from this, you were right to run from him. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Then he was gone, pulling the door closed behind him with a soft click, and Daciana was alone with her thoughts and the lingering warmth of his words. She sank onto the edge of the massive bed, her legs finally giving out, and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The fear. The relief. The bone-deep exhaustion. And underneath it all, that strange, dangerous flutter of something she didn't want to name. Because naming it would make it real. And if it was real, then she was in far more danger than she'd thought. Not from Canagan. But from herself. From the traitorous part of her heart that had felt his hand on her waist and thought, yes. This. Him. Daciana pressed her face into her hands and tried not to think about the way he'd whispered in her ear. Tried not to remember the heat of his body beneath hers on that throne. Tried not to wonder what it would feel like if he touched her again, but this time without an audience. Without ceremony. Without anything between them but want and choice. And stop. She had to stop. Tomorrow would bring enough complications without her adding more by developing feelings for the Alpha King. She needed to focus. Needed to figure out her next move. Needed to find a way out of this mess that didn't involve binding herself to another wolf, no matter how magnetic he was. But as Daciana finally stripped off her ceremony dress and crawled between the soft sheets of Canagan's guest bed, she couldn't quite shake the memory of his voice in the throne room. "You're mine now." And the terrifying part wasn't that he'd said it. It was how much she'd wanted it to be true. Chapter 2. Daciana woke to the smell of rain and something burning. Not fire. Not exactly. More like the acrid tang of scorched metal, sharp and unsettling in the back of her throat. She sat up too fast, her head spinning, the soft sheets tangling around her legs as she tried to orient herself. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The bed was too big, the ceiling too high, the silence too complete. Then it all came rushing back. The ceremony. Theron's name called with hers. The walk across the hall. The throne. Canagan's hand on her waist and his voice in her ear, low and absolute, "You're mine now." Her stomach twisted. She'd really done it. She'd rejected a sacred bond in front of the entire High Court and claimed sanctuary with the Alpha King. There was no taking it back. No pretending it hadn't happened. By now every pack in the Northern Territories would know what she'd done. Daciana swung her legs out of bed and her bare feet touched cold stone. The room looked different in daylight, still luxurious, but less intimidating. Morning sun filtered through the tall windows, turning the dust motes into tiny dancers. She could see the grounds now, rolling hills covered in dark pine forests, mountains rising in the distance like jagged teeth against the sky. Beautiful. Isolated. Trapped. That burning smell was stronger now. Daciana crossed to the window and peered down into the courtyard below. Wolves moved through the space with military precision, guards changing shifts, servants carrying supplies. And in the center of it all, a group of maybe 20 wolves stood in a loose circle around something she couldn't quite see. Someone shouted. The circle shifted. And Daciana caught a glimpse of flames rising from what looked like torn fabric and broken wood. They were burning something. Her ceremony dress, maybe. Or the binding cord Theron had been holding. Some symbolic destruction of what should have been. The thought made her feel cold despite the sun warming her skin. A knock on the door made her jump. "Miss." A female voice, young and uncertain. "The king asked me to bring you breakfast. May I come in?" Daciana glanced down at herself. She was still wearing the thin undergarment she'd slept in, her hair a wild mess around her shoulders. Not exactly presentable. But the idea of food made her stomach growl, and she realized she hadn't eaten since before the ceremony yesterday. "Yes," she called. "Come in." The door opened to reveal a girl who couldn't have been more than 17, carrying a tray laden with enough food for 3 people. She had the typical Omega build, smaller, softer, with light brown hair pulled back in a practical braid. Her eyes were down, her posture submissive, and something about it made Daciana's chest ache. That could have been her. Should have been her. A quiet Omega girl serving in some pack house, invisible and unimportant. "I'm Daciana," she said, trying to sound friendly. "What's your name?" The girl looked startled, like she hadn't expected to be asked. "Fern, miss. I serve in the king's household." "It's nice to meet you, Fern." Daciana gestured to a small table by the window. "You can put that down there. Thank you for bringing it." Fern set the tray down carefully, her movements precise and practiced. The king said you might be hungry. He asked the kitchen to prepare your favorites, but since we didn't know what those were, they made a bit of everything. Daciana's throat tightened. Canagan had thought about her favorites. Had cared enough to ask. It was such a small thing, but kindness from an alpha was so rare that she didn't quite know how to process it. This is perfect, she said. Really? Thank you. Fern nodded, but she still wouldn't meet Daciana's eyes. Is there anything else you need, miss? The king said to make sure you were comfortable. And he left clothes for you in the wardrobe, they should fit, he had them brought from the royal seamstress this morning. This morning. Which meant Canagan had been up early, arranging things. Taking care of her. The thought sent a strange flutter through her chest that she absolutely did not want to examine. I think I'm fine for now, Daciana said. Then, because Fern looked so nervous, hey. Are you okay? You seem worried. Fern's eyes finally lifted, and Daciana saw real fear there. I'm not supposed to gossip, miss. But the whole castle is talking about what you did yesterday. About how you sat on the king's throne during a binding ceremony and claimed sanctuary. Some of the wolves are saying. She trailed off, biting her lip. Saying what? That you've cursed yourself. That refusing an oracle bond will bring down bad luck on everyone close to you. Fern's voice dropped to barely a whisper. And some are saying the king made a mistake protecting you. That he should have let the ceremony finish. Daciana's hands curled into fists. Do you believe that? Fern looked torn. I don't know what to believe, miss. But I've served here for 2 years, and I've never seen the king act like he did yesterday. He's always so controlled. So careful. And then you sat on his lap and he just claimed you. Right there in front of everyone. It's all anyone can talk about. Heat crept up Daciana's neck. She'd been trying not to think about that part, the physical closeness, the way his hand had felt on her waist, the rumble of his voice through her whole body. It had been survival instinct, nothing more. Desperation. She hadn't been thinking about what it would look like or how it would feel or. The king was just upholding the law, Daciana said, more firmly than she felt. The right of sanctuary is ancient. He had to accept my claim. Maybe. Fern didn't sound convinced. But he didn't have to look at you like that. Like what? Fern's cheeks colored. Like he wanted to keep you. The words hit Daciana like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to argue, to deny it, but nothing came out. Because she'd seen that look too. Had felt the weight of it. And some part of her, some reckless, self-destructive part, had wanted him to look at her exactly that way. I should go, Fern said quickly, backing toward the door. The king said he'd come find you after you've eaten. He wants to talk about what happens next. Then she was gone, leaving Daciana alone with a tray full of food she suddenly didn't want and a head full of thoughts she couldn't organize. What happens next? Good question. Daciana forced herself to eat, the food was incredible, better than anything she'd had in her life, and then explored the wardrobe Canagan had mentioned. True to Fern's word, it was full of clothes in her size. Simple things mostly, practical dresses and soft leggings and tunics that looked comfortable rather than ornamental. Nothing like the elaborate gowns pack females usually wore. She chose a dark green dress that fell to her knees, paired with leggings underneath for warmth. When she caught her reflection in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked normal. Not like an omega in borrowed finery, but like someone who belonged in these clothes. In this place. The thought should have comforted her. Instead it terrified her. Another knock, different this time. Heavier. More assured. Come in, Daciana called, already knowing who it would be. Canagan entered like he owned the space, which, technically, he did. He'd changed since last night, now wearing dark pants and a simple shirt that did absolutely nothing to hide the muscular frame underneath. His hair was still damp, like he'd recently bathed, and Daciana caught that same cedar and winter scent from yesterday. "You're awake," he said. Not a question. His dark eyes swept over her, taking in the dress, her unbound hair, the half-eaten food on the tray. "How did you sleep?" "Fine." A lie. She'd barely slept at all, too wired and anxious to do more than doze fitfully. "Thank you for the clothes. And the food. You don't have to thank me for basic care." Canagan moved to the window, looking out at the courtyard below. "That's the bare minimum of what sanctuary requires." Daciana joined him at the window, careful to keep a few feet between them. Down below, the circle of wolves had dispersed, leaving only a small pile of ash where the flames had been. "What were they burning?" she asked. "The binding cord. Some other ceremonial items." Canagan's expression was unreadable. Elder Veronica insisted. Said it was necessary to officially dissolve the ceremony since it was never completed. "Does that mean I'm free? That there's no bond with Theron?" "Legally? Yes. The bond was never formed, so there's nothing to dissolve." Canagan turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "But Theron doesn't see it that way." Daciana's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "He showed up at my door this morning. Before dawn. Demanded to see you." Canagan's jaw tightened. "I turned him away, obviously. But he's not going to give up that easily. He believes the Oracle bond gives him claim to you, ceremony or not." "That's not how it works," Daciana said, but her voice shook. "The bond has to be completed with the binding ritual. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows a lot of things that turn out not to matter when power and pride are involved." Canagan crossed his arms. "Theron comes from a strong family. His father is head of the Riverside Pack, and they have significant influence with the High Court. He's not going to let you go without a fight." "So what do I do?" "That depends. What do you want?" The question should have been simple. But standing there in Canagan's room with morning light streaming through the windows and the memory of Theron's cruelty sharp in her mind, Daciana realized she didn't know how to answer. What did she want? Freedom? Safety? Revenge? All of the above. "I want to not be afraid anymore," she said finally. "I want to wake up without wondering if today's the day someone's going to hurt me. I want to matter. To be seen as something other than just an Omega." Canagan studied her for a long moment. "Then you're going to have to fight for it." "Fight?" Daciana laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm an Omega. I'm not a fighter. You fought yesterday." Canagan moved closer, and Daciana found herself backed against the window with nowhere to go. "You walked across that hall knowing every wolf there wanted you to stop. Knowing Theron would be furious. Knowing the elders would condemn you. And you did it anyway. That's fighting. That was running away." "No." His hand came up to cup her face, gentle but firm, and Daciana's heart stuttered. "That was refusing to accept a fate you didn't choose. There's a difference. She should pull away. Should maintain distance. Should remember that this wolf, this powerful, dangerous wolf, was still essentially a stranger. But his touch felt like an anchor in a storm, and she was so tired of being adrift. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Any of this. I don't know how to navigate pack politics or challenge the High Court or survive wolves like Theron when they come for me." "Then I'll teach you." Canagan's thumb traced her cheekbone, and the tenderness of it made her eyes burn. "That's what sanctuary means, Daciana. You're not alone anymore. You have my protection, my resources, my support. And I don't offer those things lightly. Why? The question burst out of her. Why are you doing this? You could have turned me away yesterday. Could have let the ceremony finish and avoided all this mess. So why help me? Canagan's expression shifted, something dark and complicated moving behind his eyes. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he leaned in close, his mouth next to her ear, and spoke so quietly she almost didn't hear. Because 10 years ago, I watched an Omega in my own pack beg for sanctuary from an abusive mate. And I was too young, too powerless to grant it. She died 3 months later. His voice was rough, scraped raw. I swore I'd never let that happen again. That if an Omega ever came to me seeking protection, I'd give it. No matter the cost. Daciana's breath caught. She turned her head, and suddenly their faces were inches apart. Close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel the warmth of his breath against her lips. I'm sorry, she said. For what happened to her. So am I. Canagan pulled back, and the loss of his proximity felt like a physical ache. But that's why I need you to understand something. The sanctuary I offered. Tears pricked at Daciana's eyes. No one had ever promised her anything before. No one had ever cared enough to try. Thank you, she managed. Stop thanking me. But Canagan's voice was gentle. Now come on. We have work to do. Work? If you're going to survive what's coming, you need to understand pack law. The high court structure. Your rights as an Omega under sanctuary. Canagan moved toward the door. I'm going to teach you how to defend yourself, not physically, though we might work on that too. But legally. Politically. You need to know how to argue your case when the elders come calling. When they come calling. Daciana hurried after him. Not if. Oh, they're definitely coming. Canagan led her through his private chambers into a study she hadn't seen before. Books lined every wall, floor to ceiling, and a massive desk dominated the center of the room. Veronica requested a formal audience this afternoon. She's bringing 3 other elders with her. Daciana's pulse spiked. To do what? To challenge your sanctuary claim. To argue that refusing an oracle bond violates divine law and supersedes ancient rights. Canagan settled into the chair behind his desk and gestured for her to take the one across from him. They're going to try to force you to complete the binding with Theron. They can't do that. Can they? Not if we're prepared. Canagan pulled out a massive leather-bound book and flipped it open. Which is why we're going to spend the next few hours making sure you know every law, every precedent, every loophole in the sanctuary code. By the time the elders get here, you're going to know your rights better than they do. Daciana stared at the book. It had to be hundreds of pages, dense text in what looked like old wolf script, and felt panic rising in her throat. I can't learn all of that in a few hours. You don't have to learn all of it. Just the relevant parts. Canagan's eyes met hers across the desk. Trust me. We can do this. Trust him. 2 words that should have been impossible. She'd known him less than a day. But something about the way he said it, the quiet confidence in his voice, made her want to believe. Okay, she said. Teach me. So he did. For the next 3 hours, Canagan walked her through the labyrinth of pack law with the patience of someone who genuinely wanted her to understand. He explained the history of sanctuary, how it had been created hundreds of years ago to protect Omegas from pack violence, how it had been eroded over time as alphas gained more power, how few wolves even remembered it existed anymore. He showed her the specific passages that granted her protection. Made her memorize key phrases. Quizzed her on precedents until she could recite them without looking. And the whole time, he never made her feel stupid for not knowing. Never acted like her Omega status made her less capable of understanding. He treated her like an equal, like her mind mattered as much as her survival. It was intoxicating. The key argument, Canagan said, leaning back in his chair, is going to be whether Oracle bonds supersede sanctuary law. The elders will claim they do because divine will trumps mortal law. But there's precedent from the Fallon case. 200 years ago, Daciana interrupted, the information coming back to her. An Omega claimed sanctuary to escape an arranged political marriage. The elders tried to overrule it by saying pack alliances were divinely ordained, but the king at the time ruled that no divine will could supersede an Omega's right to safety. Canagan smiled, and it transformed his face. Exactly. You're a fast learner. I'm motivated. Daciana closed the book in front of her, her head spinning with information. If I mess this up, I end up bound to Theron. That's pretty good motivation. You're not going to mess it up. Canagan stood, stretching, and Daciana tried not to notice the way his shirt pulled tight across his shoulders. And even if you stumble, I'll be right there. They can't force you into anything while you're under my protection. A knock on the door interrupted whatever Daciana might have said. One of Canagan's guards appeared, his expression grim. My king. The elders have arrived. They're waiting in the formal audience chamber. Canagan nodded. Tell them we'll be there shortly. The guard disappeared. Canagan turned to Daciana, and she saw the shift in him, the way he went from teacher to king in a heartbeat, his whole demeanor changing. Ready? He asked. No. Absolutely not. Daciana felt like she was going to throw up. But she stood anyway, smoothing down her dress with trembling hands. As ready as I'll ever be. Then let's go remind the elders who actually rules the Northern Territories. Canagan offered her his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Daciana took it. His strength was solid under her fingers, grounding. And Daciana. Yes. No matter what they say in there, remember, you did nothing wrong. You exercised your right to choose your own fate. Don't let them make you feel guilty for that. Easier said than done. But as they walked through the castle corridors toward the audience chamber, Daciana tried to hold on to his words. Tried to believe that she deserved this protection, this chance, this hope. The doors to the audience chamber loomed ahead, tall and imposing. Daciana could hear voices beyond them, Elder Veronica's sharp tones, other wolves arguing. They were already fighting about her, already debating her fate like she was a thing to be decided rather than a person with her own will. Canagan squeezed her arm gently. Breathe. She did. Once. Twice. Then the guards pulled open the doors and they stepped inside together. 4 elders stood waiting, Veronica at their head. But it was the wolf standing behind them that made Daciana's blood run cold. Theron. He was here. He was actually here, his eyes locked on her with such hatred that she physically flinched. And when he smiled, cold and cruel and promising violence, Daciana realized that this wasn't just about arguing law or precedent. This was war. Chapter 3. The audience chamber felt like a tomb. High stone walls, narrow windows that let in only thin streams of light, and the kind of suffocating silence that came before someone screamed. Daciana's fingers tightened on Canagan's arm, and she felt rather than saw him glance down at her. A question without words, "Are you okay?" She wasn't. But she nodded anyway. Elder Veronica stepped forward first, her silver hair gleaming like a blade in the dim light. She wore the traditional elder robes, deep crimson trimmed with gold, and the ceremonial staff in her hand tapped against the stone floor with each step. The sound echoed like a heartbeat. "King Canagan," she said, her voice formal and cold. "Thank you for agreeing to this audience." "I didn't agree to anything." Canagan's tone was pleasant, almost bored. "You requested. I chose to grant it. There's a difference." Veronica's jaw tightened, but she recovered quickly. "Of course, my king. Then we are grateful for your generosity in hearing our concerns. Concerns. Canagan guided Daciana to a chair positioned near his own throne at the head of the chamber. She sat, and he remained standing beside her. A united front. Is that what we're calling this? The situation is unprecedented, one of the other elders spoke up. Daciana recognized him, Elder Corbin, ancient and weathered, his face like cracked leather. An Omega refusing an oracle bond during the binding ceremony itself. Claiming sanctuary to avoid divine will. It threatens the very foundation of our pack structure. Divine will. Canagan repeated the words like they tasted bitter. Tell me, Corbin, when exactly did you start believing the oracle speaks for the gods? Last I checked, she was just a wolf with a gift for reading probability and pack dynamics. Gasps rippled through the room. Even Daciana felt shock lance through her. You didn't question the oracle. Not openly. Not like that. But Canagan wasn't finished. And even if we accept that her visions are divinely ordained, he continued, settling into his throne with casual authority, that doesn't give anyone the right to force an Omega into a bond she clearly doesn't want. Or did you all forget that consent is supposed to matter? The Omega doesn't understand what she's refusing, Veronica said sharply. Her eyes cut to Daciana, and there was nothing kind in them. She's young. Confused. Influenced by fear rather than wisdom. I understand perfectly. Daciana's voice came out stronger than she expected. All eyes swung to her, and she felt her throat try to close, but Canagan's presence beside her kept her grounded. I'm refusing a bond with someone who tormented me for years. That's not confusion. That's survival. Theron moved then, stepping around the elders to where everyone could see him. He looked different today, dressed formally, his hair slicked back, his expression carefully controlled. Nothing like the snarling, rage-filled wolf she'd seen yesterday. This was calculated. Dangerous in a different way. Tormented, he said softly, and somehow the quiet made it worse. Is that what you're calling it? We grew up together, Daciana. We trained together. Yes, I was hard on you sometimes, but that was to make you stronger. To prepare you for this bond. You hid my clothes and left me to freeze in the rain, Daciana shot back. You tripped me during hunts and laughed when I fell. You called me worthless, useless, a waste of space. That wasn't training. That was cruelty. You're exaggerating. Theron's smile never wavered. Omega memories are so fragile. So easily twisted by emotion. The condescension in his voice made Daciana's hands curl into fists. But before she could respond, Canagan spoke. Are you calling her a liar? The temperature in the room dropped. Theron's smile faltered, just for a second, and Daciana saw real fear flicker across his face. I'm saying, Theron chose his words carefully, that perhaps her perspective is colored by her nature. Omegas are more sensitive. More prone to seeing offense where none was intended. So yes. Canagan leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze locked on Theron like a predator sighting prey. You're calling her a liar. Interesting. Because I've had my people looking into you, Grave. And it turns out there are quite a few complaints about your behavior over the years. Other Omegas. Some Betas. All describing remarkably similar patterns of abuse. Theron went pale. Those were never proven. Because no one bothered to investigate. Canagan stood, and the movement was so fluid, so controlled, that it somehow felt more threatening than if he'd lunged. But I'm investigating now. And what I'm finding suggests that the Oracle didn't pair you with Daciana because you'd be good for each other. She paired you because you needed her. Silence crashed through the chamber. Even the elders looked confused. I don't understand, Elder Corbin said slowly. What do you mean the Oracle needed them paired? The Oracle sees probability, Canagan explained, his voice taking on a lecturing tone that made Daciana think of their study session this morning. She sees what's likely to happen if certain paths are followed. And what she probably saw was that Theron Grave is on a trajectory toward becoming a problem. A dangerous one. So she tried to bind him to an Omega who might soften him. Might give him something to care about besides his own ego. That's speculation, Veronica snapped. Is it? Canagan turned to face her fully. Then let's ask the Oracle herself. Bring her here. Have her explain exactly what she saw in their bond. The Oracle doesn't answer to her king. I think you'll find she does. Canagan's smile was sharp. Unless you prefer, I assume you're all hiding something. The elders exchanged glances. Daciana watched the silent communication pass between them, worry, calculation, something that looked like guilt. The Oracle is unavailable, Veronica said finally. She entered seclusion after the ceremony yesterday. As is traditional when a vision is refused. How convenient. Canagan didn't sound like he believed it for a second. So we're expected to uphold a bond based on a vision we can't verify, spoken by someone who won't defend it. Does that sound like divine will to anyone else? Or does it sound like politics? You go too far, another elder spoke up. Elder Marin, the youngest of them, though she still had at least 50 years on Daciana. The Oracle's word has guided our packs for generations. To question her now. I'm not questioning her gift, Canagan interrupted. I'm questioning your interpretation of it. And I'm questioning why you're all so invested in forcing this particular Omega into this particular bond when she's made it crystal clear she doesn't want it. Because it's what the Oracle saw. Veronica's control finally cracked, her voice rising. Because refusing divine will brings consequences. Chaos. Disorder. If we allow Omegas to simply walk away from their fated mates, what's next? Alphas refusing pack bonds. Betas denying their roles. The entire structure falls apart. Good, Canagan said flatly. The word hung in the air like a grenade. Good. Veronica looked like she might faint. You can't mean. If our structure relies on forcing unwilling wolves into bonds they don't want, then yes, it should fall apart. Canagan moved to stand behind Daciana's chair, and she felt his hand rest lightly on her shoulder. A claim. A protection. We've been hiding behind tradition and divine will to justify some truly horrible things. Maybe it's time we built something better. This is sacrilege, Elder Corbin breathed. Your father would never. My father is dead. Canagan's voice went cold. And I'm king now. Which means I get to decide what laws matter and what traditions need to die. And I've decided that forced bonds are one of those traditions. Theron made a sound low in his throat, half snarl, half whine. You can't do this. The bond is mine. She's mine. The Oracle promised. The Oracle promised nothing, Canagan cut him off. She showed you a possibility. Not a guarantee. And Daciana has exercised her right to choose a different path. That's the end of it. It's not. Theron's control shattered completely. He lunged forward, and immediately two of Canagan's guards moved to intercept him. But Theron wasn't trying to reach Daciana, he was shouting, his face twisted with rage and something that looked almost like desperation. You don't understand what you're doing. The bond has to be completed. If it's not, if she refuses, then I. He cut himself off. Stopped so abruptly it was like someone had stuffed a hand over his mouth. Canagan's eyes narrowed. Then you what, Grave? Nothing. Theron stepped back, visibly trying to regain his composure. I just meant that the Oracle's visions shouldn't be taken lightly. There are always consequences for refusing fate. But Daciana had seen it. That flash of real fear in his eyes. That moment where he'd almost said something important, something true, before catching himself. What was he hiding? "I think we're done here," Canagan said. His hand squeezed Daciana's shoulder gently. "Unless the elders have actual legal grounds to challenge the sanctuary claim." More exchanged glances. Veronica's mouth pressed into a thin line. "We need time to consult the records," she said finally. "To ensure all precedents have been properly considered. Take all the time you need." Canagan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "But while you're consulting records, Daciana remains under my protection. Untouchable. Understand?" It wasn't really a question. The elders filed out, their robes swishing against stone, their expressions ranging from disapproving to outright hostile. Theron was the last to leave, and he paused at the doorway to look back at Daciana. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "You can hide behind your king for now, but eventually you'll have to face the consequences of what you've done. And when that day comes, I'll be waiting." Then he was gone, and Daciana could finally breathe again. Canagan moved around to face her, crouching so they were eye level. "Are you all right?" "I don't know." Daciana's hands were shaking. She pressed them together in her lap to hide it. "Did that actually just happen? Did you actually tell the High Court that forced bonds should be abolished?" "I did." Canagan didn't look remotely concerned about it. "Been wanting to say it for years, honestly. They just gave me a good excuse. They're going to come after you for this. The Pax, the elders, everyone who benefits from the current system. Let them." Canagan stood, offering her his hand. "I've been preparing for a fight like this since I took the throne. It was always going to happen eventually. You just moved up the timeline." Daciana took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Her legs felt unsteady, like the ground had turned liquid beneath her. "What Theron said at the end," she started. "About consequences if the bond isn't completed. Did you notice how he panicked?" Canagan finished. "Yes. He's hiding something. Something connected to the Oracle's vision that he doesn't want revealed. What could it be? I don't know yet. But I'm going to find out." Canagan kept her hand in his as they walked toward the chamber doors. "In the meantime, I want you to stay close. Don't go anywhere in the castle without guards. Don't trust anyone you don't know. Theron might be bound by law not to touch you, but desperation makes wolves do stupid things." As if summoning the thought into reality, a commotion erupted in the hallway beyond. Shouting. The sound of something crashing. Then a female voice, high and frightened, "Let me go. I need to see him. I need to see the king." Canagan's entire body went tense. He released Daciana's hand and moved to the door, pulling it open just as guards appeared dragging a struggling woman between them. She was young, maybe Daciana's age, with wild black hair and eyes that looked too large for her thin face. "Let her go," Canagan ordered. The guards released her immediately, and the woman stumbled forward. She would have fallen if Canagan hadn't caught her. "My king," she gasped. "Please. I need sanctuary. I need." Her eyes found Daciana, and something like recognition flashed across her face. You're the one who refused the bond yesterday." "Yes," Daciana said slowly. "Who are you?" "My name is Briar. I'm from the Clearwater Pack." Briar's voice cracked. "And the Oracle called my bond 3 months ago. With Theron grave." The world tilted. Daciana heard the words but couldn't make sense of them. 3 months ago. But Theron's bond with her had been called yesterday. How could he have 2 Oracle bonds? That wasn't possible. The Oracle only saw one true mate per wolf, one perfect match. Everyone knew that. Unless everyone was wrong. "That's impossible," Daciana said. The oracle doesn't make mistakes. She didn't make a mistake. Briar's laugh sounded broken. She made a choice. She called my bond first, and I accepted it. I thought it was fate. I thought Theron would be good to me. Her hands went to her arms, and Daciana saw bruises there. Old ones, faded to yellow-green. I was wrong. Horror crawled up Daciana's spine. He hurt you. Every day. Briar's eyes filled with tears. And when I tried to leave, he said the bond gave him rights over me. That I'd promised to be his, so nothing he did was wrong. I went to the elders in my pack, but they said I had to learn to be a better mate. That if I just tried harder, he'd soften. The bond was completed. Canagan's voice was deadly quiet. You went through the binding ceremony. Yes. 3 months ago. With the oracle's blessing and my pack's approval. Briar looked at Daciana again. And then yesterday I heard that he'd been called with someone else. With you. At the high ceremony. And I realized, he was trying to replace me. To trade up to an Omega from a better pack. To erase what we had like it never existed. Daciana felt sick. She looked at Canagan and saw her own horror reflected in his face. Does the oracle know about this? Canagan demanded. She has to, Briar said. She's the one who called both bonds. But when I tried to go to her yesterday, after I heard what happened, her guards turned me away. Said she wasn't seeing anyone. That she was in sacred seclusion. Sacred seclusion, Canagan repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. Or hiding. He turned to his guards. Find the oracle. I don't care if she's in seclusion or communing with the gods themselves. Drag her back here if you have to. I want answers. The guards scattered. Canagan guided both Briar and Daciana back into the audience chamber, shutting the door behind them. Tell me everything, he said to Briar. From the beginning. And don't leave anything out. So she did. The story that spilled out was worse than Daciana had imagined. And she described the moment she'd overheard Theron talking to his father about needing a better match. About how a low-ranking Omega from Clearwater wasn't enough for his ambitions. About how he needed someone from a higher pack, someone whose family connections could elevate his status. Someone like Daciana, whose bloodline traced back to ancient pack royalty even if her Omega status had buried that legacy. He was using the oracle, Daciana realized aloud. Getting her to call multiple bonds so he could choose the one that benefited him most. But that would mean the oracle was complicit, Canagan said. That she was actively helping him manipulate the system. Or that he had something on her, Briar suggested quietly. Something that forced her cooperation. Before anyone could respond, the door burst open again. One of Canagan's guards stood there, breathing hard. My king. The oracle. The guard swallowed hard. She's gone. Her chambers are empty. It looks like she left in a hurry, sometime during the night. And we found this. He held out a piece of parchment. Canagan took it, his expression darkening as he read. Then he passed it to Daciana without a word. The handwriting was shaky, rushed. I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. But he said he'd hurt them if I didn't do what he wanted. Said he'd kill them. I believed him. I still believe him. By the time you read this, I'll be far from the Northern Territories. Don't look for me. And don't trust Theron Grave. He's not what he seems. The things he's done, the things he's planning. You have to stop him before. The letter ended there, the last word unfinished. Like the writer had been interrupted. Or had run out of time. Daciana's hands trembled as she lowered the parchment. Who was she talking about? Who did he threaten? I don't know, Canagan said grimly. But we're going to find out. And then we're going to. A scream cut through the castle. High and terrified and abruptly silenced. All three of them froze. Then Canagan was moving, yanking the door open and running toward the sound. Daciana followed without thinking, Briar right behind her. They raced through corridors, following the shouting, until they reached a section of the castle Daciana didn't recognize. Guards clustered around an open doorway. And when they parted to let Canagan through, Daciana saw what had made someone scream. A body. Female. Young. Lying in a pool of blood that was still spreading across the stone floor. Who is she? Canagan demanded. One of the guards answered, his voice shaking. Fern, my king. She served in the royal household. Someone tore her throat out. Daciana's vision swam. Fern. The sweet Omega girl who'd brought her breakfast this morning. Who'd been nervous and kind and worried about curses. She was dead. Murdered. In Canagan's own castle. Seal the exits, Canagan ordered, his voice like iron. No one leaves. I want everyone accounted for, staff, guards, visitors, everyone. Find me whoever did this. But Daciana already knew who had done it. Knew it in her bones, in her blood, in the cold dread spreading through her chest. This was a message. A warning. And as if to confirm her thoughts, one of the guards spoke up, his voice barely audible. My king. There's something, carved into the floor. Next to the body. Daciana looked where he was pointing. And there, scratched into the stone with what must have been a claw, were 4 words that made her blood turn to ice. This is your fault. The message wasn't for Canagan. It was for her. Chapter 4. Daciana couldn't stop seeing Fern's face. The way her eyes stared at nothing, empty and accusing. The way her blood had spread across the stone like dark wings. The way those 4 words, this is your fault, seemed to pulse with malice every time Daciana closed her eyes. She sat in Canagan's study now, wrapped in a blanket someone had draped over her shoulders, while chaos erupted throughout the castle. Guards ran through corridors. Voices shouted orders. And somewhere, Theron was being hunted like the monster he was. Because it had been him. Everyone knew it. He'd killed an innocent girl just to send Daciana a message. Just to remind her that his reach extended even into the heart of Canagan's protection. Just to make her afraid. It was working. Drink this. Briar pressed a cup of something warm into Daciana's hands. The other Omega had stayed close since they'd found Fern's body, her own trauma making her uniquely qualified to understand the horror crawling through Daciana's mind. It's just tea. It'll help. Daciana drank mechanically, tasting nothing. She was so young. She didn't do anything wrong. She just brought me breakfast and worried about curses and, her voice broke. This is my fault. No. Briar's hand closed over hers, firm and warm. This is Theron's fault. He's the one who chose violence. Who chose murder. You can't take responsibility for a monster's actions. But if I hadn't refused the bond, then you'd be dead. Briar's voice was flat, certain. Maybe not today. Maybe not next week. But eventually, Theron would have killed you too. That's what he does. He hurts people. And when they try to get away, he hurts them worse. The door opened and Canagan entered, his face carved from stone and fury. Blood stained his shirt, Fern's blood, from when he'd checked her body for any sign of life. He'd found none. Did you find him? Daciana asked, though she already knew the answer from Canagan's expression. No. He's gone. Vanished from the castle sometime between the audience and when Fern was killed. Canagan moved to the window, staring out at the grounds below. We've got search parties combing the territory, but he had a head start. And he knows these lands almost as well as I do. He planned this, Briar said quietly. The whole confrontation with the elders, the threats, all of it. He was buying time to set something in motion. But what? Daciana set down her cup, her hands curling into fists. What does killing Fern accomplish besides terrorizing me? How does that help him? It isolates you. Canagan turned from the window, and the look in his eyes made Daciana's breath catch. It makes you feel guilty. Makes you think that anyone who gets close to you will end up dead. So you'll push people away. Push me away. And when you're alone and vulnerable, that's when he'll strike. It's already working, Daciana admitted. I want to run. Want to leave before anyone else gets hurt because of me. That's exactly what he wants. Canagan crossed to her, crouching in front of her chair. But I need you to hear me, Daciana. Really hear me. Fern's death isn't your fault. And running won't save anyone. It'll just make you easier prey. Then what do I do? Daciana's voice cracked. How do I fight someone who kills innocent people just to hurt me? We expose him. Canagan's jaw tightened. We find out what he's hiding. Why the Oracle was helping him. What he threatened her with. And we use that to destroy him so completely that he'll never hurt anyone again. How? I have an idea. But you're not going to like it. Canagan glanced at Briar, then back to Daciana. Briar, you said you overheard Theron talking to his father about needing a better match. About connections and status. Where did this conversation happen? At his family's estate. In his father's study. Briar's eyes widened. You think there's evidence there? Something that proves what he's been doing? I think Theron is arrogant enough to keep records. Plans. Maybe even correspondence with the Oracle. Canagan stood. And I think his father might know more than he's let on. The question is how we get access without alerting them. You could demand it, Daciana suggested. You're the king. Can't you just search their estate? I could. But I'd need cause. And right now, all we have is circumstantial evidence and suspicion. The elders would fight me on it, claim I'm overstepping, maybe even accuse me of targeting a rival pack. Canagan's frustration was palpable. I need something concrete first. Proof that Theron has committed crimes serious enough to warrant royal intervention. I can get it. Everyone turned to stare at Briar. She stood, her thin frame straightening with determination. I was his mate, she continued. Officially bound. I have legal access to the family estate, to his rooms, to anywhere a mate would be allowed. And they don't know I'm here. They probably think I'm still at home, too afraid to challenge him. Absolutely not, Canagan said immediately. It's too dangerous. If Theron finds you there. He won't. He's busy hiding from your search parties. Briar's voice was steady. And even if he did show up, he can't kill me on his family's estate without witnesses. It would destroy his standing. But I can search his rooms. Find whatever he's hiding. And bring it back here as evidence. She's right, Daciana said slowly. The idea terrified her, but it also made terrible sense. It's the only way to get access without tipping them off. Canagan looked between them, conflict written across his face. If anything happens to you. Then it happens. Briar's smile was sad. I'm already dead, my king. I've been dead since the moment I accepted that bond. At least this way, my death might mean something. Might save someone else from ending up like me. You're not going to die, Canagan said firmly. Because you're not going alone. I'm sending guards with you. Discreet ones, positioned around the estate. And the moment you have what we need, you signal them and they extract you. Understood. Briar nodded. Understood. I'm coming too, Daciana said. No. Canagan's response was immediate and absolute. You're staying here where I can protect you. Theron already proved he can reach me here. Daciana stood, meeting his eyes. Fern died in your castle, under your protection. Nowhere is actually safe. And if Briar's going to risk her life for this, the least I can do is back her up. Daciana. I know his patterns. His habits. The way he thinks. Daciana's voice strengthened with each word. I spent years watching him, learning how to predict his movements so I could avoid him. That knowledge could help Briar search faster, more efficiently. And if something goes wrong, I can create a distraction while she escapes. Canagan's hands clenched at his sides. You're asking me to let you walk into the home of a wolf who wants you dead or bound to him. A wolf who just committed murder to terrorize you. Do you understand what you're asking? I understand that hiding doesn't work. Daciana moved closer to him, close enough to feel the heat radiating off his skin. I understand that Theron will keep hurting people until someone stops him. And I understand that I'm tired of being afraid. Of being a victim. So yes, I'm asking you to let me do this. To let me fight back. For a long moment, Canagan just stared at her. Then he exhaled slowly, and Daciana saw the exact moment he gave in. Fine. But you stay with the guards at all times. You don't take risks. And if I even suspect things are going wrong, I'm pulling you out. Are we clear? Clear. Good. Canagan turned to one of his advisors who'd been hovering near the door. Get me Commander Wraith. Tell him I need his best stealth team ready to move within the hour. And find me everything we have on the Grave Estate layout. The advisor hurried off. Canagan looked back at Daciana and Briar, his expression grim. This is dangerous. Not just physically, but legally. If we're caught breaking into a pack leader's home without cause, the elders will have grounds to challenge my authority. Maybe even call for my removal. Then we don't get caught, Daciana said with more confidence than she felt. Canagan's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. You're braver than you think, little Omega. The word settled into Daciana's chest, warm and steadying. She held his gaze, and something passed between them. Understanding. Trust. And underneath it all, that same pull she'd felt in the throne room. That dangerous, impossible want. Not now, she told herself firmly. Focus. 2 hours later, Daciana found herself crouched in the shadows outside the Grave Estate with 5 of Canagan's best guards and Briar beside her. The estate was smaller than she'd expected, just a main house and a few outbuildings, surrounded by dark forest. Lights glowed in some windows, but most of the structure was dark. The family should be at dinner, Briar whispered. In the formal dining room on the west side. That means the east wing where Theron's rooms are should be empty. Should be isn't the same as will be, Commander Wraith muttered. He was a grizzled wolf with more scars than Daciana could count, but Canagan trusted him completely. I don't like this. Too many variables. We don't have to like it, Daciana said. We just have to do it. Wraith grunted, which she decided to take as approval. He signaled to his team, and they moved forward in perfect silence. Daciana's heart hammered against her ribs as they approached the house, keeping to the deepest shadows. Briar led them to a side entrance, servant's door, rarely guarded. She produced a key from somewhere in her clothes and unlocked it with shaking hands. The click seemed impossibly loud in the quiet night. Inside, the house smelled like old money and older secrets. Wood polish and leather and something faintly rotten underneath. Daciana's skin crawled as they moved through darkened hallways, Briar navigating from memory while Wraith's guards checked corners and watched for movement. They reached Theron's wing without incident. Briar pushed open a heavy door, revealing a suite of rooms that made Daciana's stomach turn. Expensive furniture. Art on the walls. And everywhere, signs of cruelty. A training whip hung decoratively above the fireplace. Claw marks gouged the wooden bedpost. And on the desk, correspondence scattered like dead leaves. Search everything, Wraith ordered quietly. Letters, journals, anything that might serve as evidence. And be quick. We've got maybe 20 minutes before someone realizes we're here. They split up. Daciana went to the desk, her hands trembling as she sorted through papers. Most were mundane, pack business, trading agreements, social invitations. But then she found a letter tucked beneath a ledger, and her blood ran cold. The Oracle has agreed to call the second bond as discussed. She requires assurance that her sister will remain unharmed. I've given my word, though we both know how fragile such promises are. Once the ceremony is complete and the Omega is bound, you'll have the connections you need. And I'll have the leverage over the Oracle to ensure her continued cooperation in future matters. The letter was unsigned, but the handwriting was familiar. She'd seen it before, on official pact documents. Theron's father had written this. Found something, Briar called softly from across the room. She held up a leather journal, her face pale. It's Theron's. He documented everything. Every conversation with the Oracle. Every threat. Her voice broke. Every time he hurt me. He wrote it down like it was research. Like I was an experiment. Daciana felt sick. But she forced herself to keep searching, to keep digging. There had to be more. Had to be something that would. Footsteps. In the hallway. Coming closer. Wraith's hand went to his weapon. The other guards melted into defensive positions. And Daciana's mind raced, trying to figure out if they could hide or if they needed to fight or. The door opened. But it wasn't Theron who entered. It was an older male, gray-haired and distinguished, with Theron's same cruel mouth and calculating eyes. Theron's father. Pack leader Aldrich Grave. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene with surprising calm. The guards. The two Omegas. The scattered papers. Interesting, he said mildly. I'd wondered when King Canagan would make his move. I just expected something more official. Warrants. Formal accusations. Not breaking and entering with his guards. We have warrants, Wraith lied smoothly. Signed by the king himself. Do you? Aldrich stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Then you won't mind if I send for the High Court to verify them? I'm sure the elders would be very interested to learn that the king is raiding pack leaders' homes without proper cause. We have cause, Daciana said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. She held up the letter. Your son coerced the Oracle into calling false bonds. He threatened her family. And he's been systematically abusing Omegas and documenting it like a science project. Aldrich's eyes narrowed. You must be Daciana. The Omega who started all this trouble. My son was quite taken with you, you know. Said you had spirit. Though clearly he underestimated just how much. Your son is a murderer, Briar said quietly. He killed a girl named Fern tonight. Just to terrorize Daciana. Just to prove he could. Did he? Aldrich didn't sound surprised. Or upset. Just interested. Well. That is unfortunate. I'd told him to be more subtle. But Theron never did have much patience. The casual way he said it, like murder was just a tactical error rather than a horror, made Daciana want to scream. You knew, she said. You knew what he was doing and you helped him. Of course I knew. I planned most of it. Aldrich moved to his son's desk, picking up papers with casual authority. Theron is gifted in many ways, but strategy isn't one of them. He needed guidance. Direction. And I needed leverage. Over the Oracle, Wraith said flatly. You've been blackmailing her. Blackmail is such an ugly word. I prefer mutually beneficial arrangement. Aldrich smiled. The Oracle has a beloved younger sister. Unmarked. Vulnerable. And I have resources. Protection. As long as she cooperates, her sister remains safe. It's really very simple. And Theron's behavior? Daciana demanded. The abuse? The cruelty? That was part of your plan too. That was his own innovation, I'm afraid. I've tried to curb his more excessive tendencies, but... Aldrich shrugged. Some wolves are simply born with a taste for violence. Better to channel it productively than to let it run wild. Productively, Briar repeated, her voice hollow. You think what he did to me was productive? You're still alive, aren't you? And your suffering served a purpose, it taught him control. Restraint. How to break someone without killing them. Aldrich's gaze shifted to Daciana. Which is why you're so valuable, my dear. You're from old bloodlines. Connected to ancient pack royalty. A bond with you elevates our family. And your spirit means you'll take longer to break, which gives Theron more opportunity to perfect his technique. Horror crashed over Daciana in waves. This wasn't just about power or politics. This was about creating a monster and setting him loose. King Canagan will never let that happen, she said. Won't he? Aldrich's smile widened. Your king is young. Idealistic. He thinks he can change centuries of tradition with declarations and protective gestures. But the packs don't follow him out of love. They follow him out of obligation. And that obligation has limits. What are you saying? Wraith asked, though Daciana suspected he already knew. I'm saying that if Canagan continues down this path, abolishing forced bonds, challenging the Oracle's authority, undermining pack structure, there will be consequences. The elders are already discussing intervention. And if the king proves unable to maintain order? Aldrich spread his hands. Well. Leadership transitions aren't unheard of. You're talking about a coup, Daciana breathed. I'm talking about survival of our way of life. And if that requires removing a king who's forgotten his place, then so be it. Aldrich moved toward the door. Now, I'm going to go call the guards. You'll all be detained while we sort out this unfortunate invasion. And by the time the High Court finishes investigating, I suspect King Canagan will have much bigger problems than one Omega's sanctuary claim. He reached for the door handle. Wraith moved faster than Daciana would have thought possible for a wolf his age. He closed the distance, his hand clamping down on Aldrich's shoulder, spinning him around. I don't think so, Wraith said quietly. See, the thing about breaking into someone's home. You tend to hear things. Learn things. And right now, you've just confessed to conspiracy, blackmail, and accessory to murder. In front of 6 witnesses. Aldrich's face went white. You have no proof. We have your letter. Your son's journal. And your own words. Wraith's smile was sharp. That's more than enough proof for the king to bring formal charges. And once the Oracle's sister is safe, once she's no longer under your thumb, the Oracle herself will testify. She'll tell everyone exactly what you and your son have been doing. The elders won't allow it. They'll protect. The elders will protect themselves, Daciana interrupted. And the second they realize you've been manipulating the Oracle, undermining the very foundation of divine authority they claim to uphold, they'll throw you to the wolves. Pun intended. Aldrich's jaw worked. His eyes darted to the door, calculating odds, probably planning how to escape or talk his way out. But Wraith's guards had already moved to block the exits, and there was nowhere to run. "You've lost," Briar said softly. "You and your son. You've both lost." The sun was rising by the time they made it back to the castle. Aldrich Grave rode in chains, silent and furious, while Wraith's guards carried boxes of evidence. Letters. Journals. Correspondence between Aldrich and various pack leaders suggesting that the conspiracy ran deeper than anyone had suspected. Canagan met them at the gates, and the relief on his face when he saw Daciana safe made her chest ache. "You found it," he said. "Not a question." "All of it." Daciana held out the leather journal and the incriminating letter. "Everything we need to destroy them both." Canagan took the evidence, but his eyes never left her face. "Are you all right?" "I am now." And strangely, it was true. Daciana felt different somehow. Stronger. Like refusing to be a victim, like fighting back, had changed something fundamental inside her. "Theron's still out there," Canagan warned. "We haven't found him yet." "You will," Daciana said with certainty. "And when you do, we'll make sure he never hurts anyone again." Over the next week, the Northern Territories erupted into chaos. The Oracle emerged from hiding and gave testimony that brought down not just the Graves but half a dozen other pack leaders who'd been part of the conspiracy. Forced bonds were officially abolished. New laws were passed protecting Omegas. And Canagan's authority, rather than being weakened, grew stronger as wolves saw him fight for genuine justice. Theron was found trying to flee to the Southern Territories. He fought when they came for him, and he didn't survive the confrontation. Some part of Daciana felt she should be sorry about that. But mostly she just felt relief. The Oracle's sister was relocated to the castle under royal protection. Briar was released from her bond and given resources to start a new life. And Daciana. Daciana stood in Canagan's study watching another sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. She'd been here for 2 weeks now. Long enough that it was starting to feel like home rather than sanctuary. "You're thinking too loud," Canagan's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him in the doorway, exhaustion written across his features. He'd barely slept since this all started, too busy rebuilding pack structure and handling the political fallout. "Sorry," she said. "Just processing everything. It's a lot to process." He moved to stand beside her at the window. Close, but not touching. Careful space that somehow felt more intimate than contact would have. "How are you holding up?" "Better than I expected." Daciana glanced at him. "You changed everything, you know. The entire pack system. Centuries of tradition. All because I sat on your lap during a ceremony." "No." Canagan's hand found hers, warm and sure. "I changed things because they needed changing. You just gave me the excuse to finally do it. Still. You took a huge risk. For me. For all the Omegas like me. It was worth it." His thumb traced circles on her palm, and Daciana's breath hitched. "Besides, you took risks too. Walking into that throne room. Going to the Grave estate. Fighting back when it would have been easier to give up." "I had good motivation," Daciana said softly. "I didn't want to end up like Briar. Broken and trapped. You could never be like Briar. You're too stubborn." But Canagan's voice was fond. "Which brings me to something I need to ask you." Daciana's heart stuttered. "What?" "Your sanctuary claim technically ends once the threat against you is resolved. Theron is dead. His father is imprisoned. The conspiracy is dismantled." Canagan turned to face her fully, and the look in his eyes made her forget how to breathe. "Which means you're free to go." I can arrange safe passage to any pack you choose, set you up with resources and protection. You can start over somewhere new. Build the life you want. Or? Daciana asked, because she could hear the unspoken word hanging between them. Or you could stay. Canagan's hand tightened on hers. Not as someone under sanctuary. Not as an Omega seeking protection. But as someone I want here. Someone I can't imagine this castle without. Canagan. I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But I've felt something since the moment you walked across that hall and sat on my throne. Like you were exactly where you were supposed to be. His free hand came up to cup her face. I don't believe in oracle bonds or divine fate. But I believe in choice. And I'm choosing you, Daciana. If you'll have me. Tears pricked at Daciana's eyes. A month ago, she'd been invisible. Worthless. An Omega everyone dismissed. And now the Alpha King was offering her not just protection or safety, but partnership. Choice. A future built on mutual respect and want. Yes, she whispered. I choose you too. Canagan's smile was like sunrise. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, but Daciana rose to meet him instead. Their lips met gentle and searching, a question and an answer all at once. When they finally broke apart, Canagan rested his forehead against hers. You're mine now, he murmured, echoing the words he'd spoken in the throne room. But only because you want to be. I want to be, Daciana confirmed. Then, because she'd learned something about her own strength over these past weeks, she added, and you're mine too. Remember that. I will. Canagan pulled her close, and Daciana let herself relax into his embrace. Let herself feel safe. Not because someone was protecting her, but because she'd learned to protect herself. To fight for what she wanted. Outside the window, the sun finished setting, and the northern territories settled into twilight. Somewhere out there, Omegas were hearing about the new laws. About sanctuary. About choice. And maybe, just maybe, they were beginning to believe that they could be something more than what others decided for them. Just like Daciana had. She'd walked into that throne room seeking escape. And she'd found freedom instead. Not the kind that came from running away, but the kind that came from standing her ground and refusing to accept the fate others tried to force on her. She'd sat on the Alpha King's lap to escape her chosen mate. And in doing so, she'd chosen herself. Her own future. Her own happiness. And that, Daciana realized as Canagan held her close and whispered promises against her hair, was worth every risk she'd taken to get here. Thanks for listening till the end. If you enjoyed this story, tap like, hit subscribe, and don't stop here, there's another story waiting for you. Just click the video on your screen to keep going.